From dried fish to digital dreams. This is the emotional, epic journey of Samsung, a true titan of transformation. Samsung's story began not in a lab, not in a factory, but in a small town called Daegu, South Korea. In 1938, Lee Byung-chul started a trading business. He had no money, no fame, just courage, a bicycle, and a strong desire to survive. He didn't sell technology. He sold simple things, dried fish, vegetables, and noodles. Nothing fancy. But in a poor, war-torn country, these were valuable. People needed food. And he gave them what they needed, with honesty and discipline. The company was small, but the name was big. Samsung means 3 stars, a symbol of something strong and everlasting. Lee didn't know the future, but he knew one thing. He wanted his company to last, to stand tall in hard times. Lee was not a typical businessman. He was quiet but sharp, calm but fearless. He believed Korea could rise. While others waited, he acted. He rode his bike from town to town, shaking hands, learning what people needed, and delivering it. When World War II ended, Korea was left in pieces. But instead of escaping, Lee expanded. He bought trucks. He opened warehouses. He turned his small shop into a growing trade network. He wasn't building a company. He was building a country. Then came the Korean War. Fire, bombs, hunger. Many businesses collapsed. But Samsung kept going. Why? Because it was useful. It wasn't a luxury. It was a lifeline. Food in chaos, trust in fear. People relied on it. And Lee didn't let them down. But he knew food alone wasn't the future. In 1952, he made a bold move. He stepped into a completely different world, insurance, property and marine insurance. At that time, nobody thought it would work. But Lee thought long-term. Why insurance? Because people were afraid. Their houses were gone. Their ships were sinking. Their lives were uncertain. Insurance gave them a little peace. And Lee knew peace was power. If he could sell that, he could sell anything. Samsung Fire and Marine became part of the group. It wasn't the most exciting job, but it was solid, profitable, and most importantly, stable. While others chased fast money, Lee built foundations. Strong, silent, smart foundations. By now, Samsung was more than a food seller. It was a symbol, a quiet helper, a friend in bad times. Lee didn't want fame. He wanted respect. And step by step, he was getting it. Not with noise, but with service. Looking back, 1938 to 1952 seems simple. No tech, no logos, no gadgets, just sugar, fish, and rice. But it was not simple. It was the beginning of one of the most extraordinary journeys in business history. The foundation of a future giant. The man with noodles had now become a man of vision. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was preparing for a leap that would shock the world, starting with the power of sweetness. After the war, Korea was starving, not just for food, but for something sweet, something hopeful. In 1953, Lee Byung-chul saw a gap, sugar. He opened Korea's first sugar refinery. A risky move, but it worked. Samsung became a taste of happiness. Sugar wasn't just a product. It was a symbol. It showed that Korea could produce, not just import. That it could grow, not just recover. It wasn't about profit. It was about pride. People were poor, but now they had a reason to smile again. But Lee wasn't done. In 1954, he stepped into wool and textile manufacturing. Why? Because clothes were expensive. Korea imported them. Lee thought, why not make our own? And he did. He built one of the first large textile factories in the country. It wasn't easy. Machines broke. Power went out. Workers were untrained. But Lee believed in people. He trained them. He invested in equipment. He built systems. Soon, Samsung was not just weaving threads. It was weaving Korea's new identity. The 1950s were years of discipline. No shortcuts. No quick wins. Samsung's success came from routine, repetition, reliability. Lee didn't rush. He climbed slowly, step by step, building one strong base after another. It was methodical, ingenious. In 1957, another layer was added, life insurance. People were still scared. Many had lost family in the war. Lee offered something unique, the future, a chance to protect their loved ones. Samsung wasn't just a business. It was becoming a safety net. Every move was quiet, almost invisible. No ads, no big slogans, just action. But those who watched closely knew something powerful was rising. A company that did everything. A company with hands in every home, every street, every family's story. And still, Lee wasn't finished. In 1958, he built a flour mill. Bread was a luxury back then, but he wanted it to be normal. To him, food, clothes, security, these weren't separate businesses. They were one mission: to make Korea stronger. By the end of the 1950s, Samsung was no longer a trader. It was a creator, a builder, a protector. Lee had quietly built an empire of essentials. But outside, the world was changing. Fast. A new kind of revolution was coming, not industrial, but digital. In 1959, Samsung launched its own candy brand. It sounds small, but for Korean children, it was everything. A sweet escape. A piece of color in a gray world. For Lee, it was another step in touching hearts, not just wallets. By 1960, Samsung was in food, fabric, insurance, and hope. But a question was growing. Could this humble, careful company enter something bigger? Something more powerful? Something that might change its destiny forever? Lee had a vision. But what he was about to do next would shock even his closest advisors. Because the next step wasn't food. It wasn't sugar. It wasn't clothes. It was something far more complicated and far more dangerous. The 1960s were wild years for the world. The Beatles, space races, civil rights. But in South Korea, something else was rising: Samsung. Quietly, without noise, it began changing shape. From factories to something smarter, something sharper. Lee Byung-chul didn't want Samsung to be just a factory brand. He wanted it everywhere, in hearts, in homes, in headlines. So he entered retail. Department stores. A place where Samsung didn't just make things, it sold them, beautifully. The stores were elegant, modern, a mix of East and West. For Korean families, shopping there felt like stepping into the future. Samsung wasn't just a producer anymore. It was a lifestyle, a brand, a name people could trust and touch. But behind the clean glass and white floors, something even bigger was happening. Lee knew that the world was entering a new age, the age of media, news, communication. So in 1965, he founded the newspaper Jungang Ilbo. A tech company with a newspaper? Strange. Not for Lee. He believed media was power. If you could shape information, you could shape minds. The paper wasn't just about headlines. It was about influence. Samsung was learning how to speak. Meanwhile, Samsung's insurance and retail branches were thriving. Families bought Samsung clothes, ate Samsung snacks, read Samsung newspapers, and trusted Samsung with their future. The brand was becoming something close to sacred. But Lee wasn't smiling. He was watching. He saw the West, Japan, America, Europe, building machines, electronics, chips, radios, calculators. He knew that Korea would fall behind if it didn't leap, and leap soon. So, in secret meetings, he started asking strange questions. How do transistors work? What's a circuit board? Can we build a black and white TV? His advisors were confused. But Lee was planning a silent storm. In 1970, Samsung quietly entered the electronics business. No celebration, no grand opening, just a small lab, a few engineers, and a goal: to understand the future, to touch electricity, to control it, to create something Korea had never seen. In 1971, Samsung made its first TV set. It was simple, heavy, and small. But for Korea, it was magic. A window into the world. A light in the living room. A sign that Korea was no longer watching from the sidelines. It was stepping onto the stage. Then, in 1974, Lee shocked everyone again. He bought a bankrupt company. Not a store. Not a sugar brand. A steel company, Korea Shipbuilding and Engineering Corporation. People thought he had gone mad. But he hadn't. Because ships meant industry. Industry meant power. And power, well, Lee knew where that road could lead. But it wasn't just about ships. It was about something hidden, something metallic, something with tracks, something that roared. But that's a story we're not quite ready for, not yet. The world was no longer simple. Radios were shrinking. Screens were glowing. People wanted faster, louder, newer. But Samsung wasn't running. It was building. And in 1974, it stepped into heavy industry: steel, engines, shipbuilding. Real muscle. Samsung's move into shipbuilding wasn't about boats. It was about power. If you can build a ship, you can build anything, from oil rigs to turbines to steel giants. It was the foundation of something bigger, colder, and much more dangerous. The factories were massive, sparks flying, steel bending, machines roaring, young Korean engineers working day and night. They weren't just building ships, they were learning to bend metal, wire systems, and calculate precision under pressure. Then, in 1976, Samsung surprised everyone again. It opened Everland, a theme park, a place of joy, colors, rides, and music. It looked like fun, but for Samsung, it was also business. Real estate, tourism, hospitality, and customer emotion. Everland wasn't just a park. It was a message. Samsung could now touch your heart, not just your home. It could entertain, inspire, make your children laugh. And when you build joy, you build loyalty. That matters, especially for what was coming. In 1977, the next shock arrived. Samsung launched its aerospace division. Rockets, engines, cameras, satellites. Suddenly, it wasn't just about factories. It was about flight, about reaching the sky, about touching space itself. At first, it sounded like a dream. Korea had no space program, no NASA. But Lee believed in questions. What if we made rocket parts? What if we made defense cameras? That what if turned into blueprints, then into steel and fire. By 1979, Samsung had hotels, newspapers, ships, parks, satellites, and steel. It also had something else, silence. Lee didn't like media attention. He liked control. While others shouted, Samsung listened, watched, and learned. And then, the silence shifted. Somewhere deep in the factories, engineers were working on something strange. It had wires, armor, sensors, and a soul of steel. No one talked about it, but it moved differently. It wasn't a TV. It wasn't a ship. It had a body. It had a brain. It had a purpose. And soon, it would have a name. Not a name you'd wear, or eat, or watch. A name that whispered war. A name that didn't blink. A name that moved through fire. But let's not rush. Some machines deserve a proper introduction. The 1980s began with questions. Samsung had built ships, made steel, entered electronics. But now it was building something secret, something military. Not radios, not TVs, but machines that moved, locked, fired. Machines made for battle. The first came quietly, fire control systems for tanks. Computers that could calculate angles, wind, motion. Systems that let tanks see before they were seen, hit before they were hit. It wasn't about speed. It was about survival. This was not the Samsung people saw on billboards. This was the Samsung in camouflage. The one in bunkers, labs, underground testing fields. The one that spoke in code. The one that didn't sell, but defended. By the mid-80s, Samsung became a key player in South Korea's defense. It developed advanced electronics for the military, sensors, radars, thermal imaging. Its engineers weren't making commercials anymore. They were making silence. Then came something bigger. A full tank. Codename K1. A modern war machine with Samsung's eyes and brain inside. It was South Korea's first main battle tank, and Samsung made it smarter. It could aim in motion. It could see in the dark. For the public, this wasn't visible. For Lee Byung-chul, it was a turning point. His company was now untouchable. It didn't just feed Korea. It protected it. From candy to cannon fire, Samsung had transformed. But Lee didn't stop at tanks. He looked up again, into the sky. Missiles, satellites, defense cameras, communication systems. If it flew, he wanted it. If it launched, he wanted to build it. If it watched from above, he wanted it sharper. In the late 80s, Samsung helped develop air defense systems, weapons that could intercept threats in the sky. Precision systems. Fast, deadly, invisible until the last second. The world didn't know, but the government did. And they listened. At the same time, Samsung's civilian tech exploded. It launched its first mobile phones. Its home appliances, fridges, washers, became common in Korean homes. Two worlds were growing in parallel, comfort and control. 1987 brought grief. Lee Byung-chul passed away. The founder was gone, but his vision lived on. His son, Lee Kuan-hee, took control, and he wasn't quiet like his father. He was bold, restless, hungry for a global stage. Samsung had already built the body. Now, under Lee Kuan-hee, it would find its voice, its ambition, its face. A new era was beginning, one that would soon make Samsung more than Korean. It would make it universal. But not before it finished one more job. A machine. Big, loud, heavy, and deadly. It wasn't ready yet, but it was coming. The 1990s weren't peaceful. Conflicts raged in the Gulf, in Europe, in shadows. And Samsung, once a company of sugar and shirts, was now rolling into the battlefield, literally. It was time to meet the K9 Thunder. This wasn't a tank. It was bigger, louder, a self-propelled howitzer, a mobile artillery beast that could strike targets 40 kilometers away. And Samsung was behind it. Not just the armor, the heart. Electronics. Targeting. Command. The K9 Thunder was born in secrecy, tested in silence, and revealed with pride. It could fire, move, and fire again, all before the enemy could react. It gave Korea a weapon not of fear, but of confidence. And the world noticed. While one part of Samsung was building weapons, another was entering homes. The 1990s became the golden age of Samsung's consumer electronics. TVs, cameras, printers, MP3 players, hard drives. Samsung was no longer just Korean, it was global. And as the Cold War ended, another war began, the tech war. Companies fought not with guns, but with gadgets. And Samsung was ready. Its labs filled with young minds. Engineers who dreamed in pixels, who built in circuits. But it wasn't all screens and storage. In the 90s, Samsung also entered petrochemicals, fertilizers, plastics, mining. It was digging into the earth, literally, fueling not just energy, but industry, farming, factories, entire economies. And then there was home life. Samsung dishwashers, Samsung air conditioners, Samsung microwaves. By the end of the decade, a middle-class family could live in a Samsung world, eating, sleeping, working inside its quiet empire. Yet even as it entered more peaceful spaces, Samsung's defense arm didn't sleep. It developed air defense systems, surveillance technologies, battlefield communication tools, eyes and ears for armies. Silent, invisible guardians. The name Samsung now meant different things to different people. To a mother, a fridge. To a soldier, a radar. To a child, a toy. To a general, a weapon. It wasn't a brand. It was a language, one that spoke everywhere. By 1999, Samsung had transformed again. It had survived war. It had built comfort. It had touched the sky. But the real war was just starting, the war of innovation. And the battlefield was going digital. Lee Kuan, he saw it coming. And he was ready. The new millennium brought new ambition. Samsung was no longer content with gadgets. It started building megastructures. Skyscrapers, power plants, and energy hubs rose from the ground, all with Samsung's quiet engineering behind the scenes. One of its boldest moves? The Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. Samsung C&T helped bring it to life. From foundation to final glass panel, Samsung proved it wasn't just a tech company. It could shape skylines and futures. But while one side of Samsung went up, the other went deep. Into machines smaller than dust, semiconductors. In the 2000s, Samsung became a global leader in microchips. Chips that powered phones, computers, satellites, everything. Chips are the brains of modern life. And Samsung made billions of them. Fast, efficient, powerful. Used by giants like Apple, Sony, and even military tech companies. Samsung was now inside everything, even its competitors. At the same time, Samsung was exploring robotics. Not just cute toys, but industrial bots. Machines that worked on factory floors, lifted heavy parts, sorted components with no rest. Precision became the company's second language. Energy wasn't left out. Samsung developed gas turbines, elevators, full power stations. It no longer just used electricity, it generated it. From turbines in deserts to smart elevators in cities, Samsung's reach was everywhere. And in homes, things got smarter. Samsung refrigerators could connect to the internet. TVs could stream. Phones could do more than call. People were starting to live with Samsung, not just buy it. The brand became part of daily rhythm. Printers, laptops, HDDs, MP3 players. Samsung's consumer electronics were everywhere. Stylish, reliable, powerful. Teens used them. Offices trusted them. Airports relied on them. It wasn't hype. It was habit. Lee Kuan-hee's famous motto echoed across departments. Change everything, except your wife and children. It sounded funny, but it meant one thing: innovate relentlessly. Never get comfortable. Never assume you've won. By 2009, Samsung had become a master of scale. From massive towers to microscopic circuits, from entertainment to energy, it moved in every direction. But one device was about to explode in popularity, and Samsung was watching. A small rectangle of glass. A new kind of battlefield. A screen you carry in your pocket. The smartphone. And Samsung was preparing to fight for the top. The 2010s arrived with a buzz. Not just any buzz, a smartphone buzz. The world was changing, fast. Screens got thinner, brighter, smarter. People no longer used phones just to talk. They used them to live. And Samsung was ready. The Galaxy series changed everything. Stylish, fast, powerful, and Android-based. With every new model, Samsung took aim at Apple. This wasn't just a product war. It was a cultural one. iPhone versus Galaxy. East versus West. Touch versus touch. People argued. Compared cameras. Debated battery life. Meanwhile, Samsung smiled. Because either way, everyone was watching. Every phone release became an event. Every update, a headline. Samsung was now part of pop culture. But phones were just the beginning. In 2010, Samsung made a move into medical tech. It acquired Medicine, a company that made ultrasound machines. Quietly, Samsung stepped into hospitals, into surgeries, into human life itself. This was a different kind of screen. One that showed heartbeats, babies, tumors. Not for entertainment, but for survival. And Samsung didn't enter casually. It entered with purpose, with precision, with a plan to lead. Then came smart things in 2014. Samsung entered the smart home game. Fridges that talked, lights that listened, TVs that followed your voice. It wasn't science fiction anymore. It was your living room, connected, responsive, alive. The smart home wasn't just about comfort. It was about data, automation, learning. Samsung built devices that talked to each other. Your phone unlocked your door. Your washing machine messaged your TV. The home had become a brain. Samsung didn't just join the IoT wave, it helped create it. By buying, building, and connecting everything, it made homes intelligent. Suddenly, people weren't just using Samsung. They were living with it, room by room. And all this happened while it kept dominating in chips, screens, and appliances. Samsung wasn't slowing down. It was learning how to live in your pocket, your heart, your hospital, and your home. By the end of 2014, Samsung had become more than a company. It was becoming an ecosystem. But what happens when your fridge knows more than you? What happens when your watch monitors your stress? That's where the next chapter begins. In 2015, Samsung took another leap, straight into your wallet. It launched Samsung Pay, a mobile payment system that turned phones into credit cards. People no longer needed plastic. With a tap, a phone could buy coffee, clothes, even a train ticket. Unlike other mobile wallets, Samsung Pay worked with older payment machines too. That meant it could be used almost anywhere, not just in fancy shops. Suddenly, Samsung was holding your money, not just your photos or contacts. But the real surprise came in 2016 and 2017. Samsung bought Harman, a global leader in automotive electronics and audio. Why? Because the next battlefield wasn't just phones. It was cars. And Samsung was already in the driver's seat. With Harman, Samsung started working on smart dashboards, connected systems, and in-car audio tech. Cars became like smartphones on wheels, screens, sensors, software. Samsung was now part of the road, not just the pocket. And as cars became smarter, so did the sky. In the late 2010s, Samsung began developing satellite projects. Quietly, carefully, it worked on space communications, small orbital systems, and imaging tech. The Earth was no longer enough. This wasn't NASA-level exploration. Not yet. But Samsung satellites supported weather tracking, global internet, military surveillance. The same company that once sold noodles was now reaching outer space, literally and boldly. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Samsung kept growing in health tech. It added AI to its medical imaging devices, machines that could detect tumors, measure heart risks, and assist doctors in real time. Diagnosis became faster, more accurate. Samsung wasn't replacing doctors, it was upgrading them. With AI, machines could now analyze thousands of scans in seconds. They saw patterns human eyes could miss. And in hospitals around the world, lives were quietly being saved. By 2019, Samsung was in your phone, your home, your car, your body, and above your planet. It wasn't just a tech company anymore. It was a life company. You woke up with it. You drove with it. You paid with it. You trusted it. But in the next decade, something even deeper was coming. Something invisible, powerful, and tiny. It wasn't just about smart homes or phones anymore. It was about smart biology. In the 2020s, Samsung became smaller, but smarter. It wasn't just making devices you could see. It was building technologies you couldn't. Tiny chips, nanosystems, biotech solutions that could enter the body, analyze cells, and predict illness before it appeared. One of Samsung's boldest steps was into biotechnology. It launched projects to develop treatments, diagnostics, and even synthetic biology tools. What used to take labs days to detect, Samsung machines could now read in minutes, with microscopic precision. Nanotechnology allowed Samsung to build ultra-small sensors. These devices could track temperature, glucose, oxygen, all inside your body. Combined with wearables, they turned users into walking health labs. Prevention became the new cure. In medical AI, Samsung partnered with Sonio to create intelligent diagnostic tools. These systems could scan for risks in pregnancies, flag genetic abnormalities, and support doctors with instant, data-backed suggestions, all powered by algorithms. Doctors weren't the only ones watching. Samsung's AI also helped users monitor their mental health. Smartwatches tracked stress levels. Apps suggested breathing exercises. Sleep tracking became therapy. Samsung cared not just how you moved, but how you felt. And as the world became more digital, Samsung built protection into its tech. Advanced encryption, biometric locks, face recognition. Data became gold, and Samsung guarded it like a fortress, while making it easy to access with a blink or touch. Meanwhile, in homes, the smart revolution deepened. Fridges suggested recipes based on leftovers. Washing machines optimized water use. TVs responded to mood lighting. Samsung wasn't just in your home. It was part of your family rhythm. But tech wasn't everything. Samsung also became a global sponsor of meaning. It supported major cultural and sports events, the Olympics, art festivals, global music tours. Not just with ads, but with technology that powered the experience. The brand stood for more than performance. It stood for possibility. When people saw the Samsung logo, they didn't just think of a device. They thought of progress, connection, and quiet excellence woven into everyday life. And deep inside Samsung's labs, something new was forming. Not a product. Not yet. But a question. What if the next frontier wasn't what we build, but what we become? As the 2020s progressed, Samsung's identity shifted. It wasn't only about making faster phones or clearer TVs. It was about shaping how humans live, think, feel. Technology became the tool. But the mission? Human potential. Human protection. In schools, Samsung launched digital education platforms. It didn't just give students tablets. It helped create smart classrooms, AI tutors, personalized learning. Children in remote villages accessed the same tools as kids in big cities. Sustainability also became central. Samsung invested heavily in green tech, recyclable materials, energy-efficient chips, solar-powered systems. It built factories that reused water, reduced emissions, and turned waste into innovation. Even packaging changed. No more plastic clutter. Samsung boxes became reusable, biodegradable. The company knew that progress meant nothing if the planet didn't survive to enjoy it. Innovation without responsibility was no longer acceptable. At global sports events, Samsung's presence was everywhere. Not just logos, experiences, virtual reality zones, interactive displays, AI-powered analytics for athletes. Fans cheered, athletes competed, powered by invisible Samsung systems. In culture, Samsung supported digital artists, musicians, creators. Its screens became canvases. Its devices, instruments. Through collaboration, it helped spread voices, stories, and emotion, one pixel, one beat, one gesture at a time. But with great reach came great responsibility. People worried about privacy, dependence on devices, AI control. Samsung responded by building human-first design, transparent privacy settings, AI that asked permission, not just assumed it. At the same time, Samsung supported mental health projects. From mood-aware lighting to AI counselors and wearables, the goal was to protect not just data, but dignity. The screen wasn't a wall. It became a window into the human mind. And still, Samsung's engineers kept dreaming. They asked, what if your phone could sense loneliness? What if your fridge could remind you to call your parents? What if your home didn't just respond, it cared? By 2025, Samsung wasn't selling gadgets. It was delivering empathy through electronics. A bold promise. We'll make the future not just smart, but kind. In this phase of its journey, Samsung stopped asking, what can we make? And began asking, why should we make it? The company's labs were no longer focused only on speed and scale, but on meaning, on building tech with soul. Engineers started studying not just code, but emotion, how people interact, what brings joy, what causes stress. Devices learned to adapt not to commands, but to feelings. A sad face on camera? Your lights softened. The music changed. In hospitals, Samsung's AI didn't just detect illness. It helped predict it. In one test, it flagged early signs of disease days before symptoms appeared. For some patients, that tiny alert meant the difference between danger and survival. And then came a whisper from the labs. What if we can learn not just from data, but from life? Samsung's neural networks started training on real-world emotion, not just logic. Machines began to recognize fear, hesitation, relief, hope. For elderly users, Samsung developed soft robotics, helpers that reminded them to take medicine, stretch their legs, video call loved ones. These weren't cold machines. They were warm presences, designed to reduce loneliness, not just assist tasks. In agriculture, Samsung helped build AI irrigation systems. Drones flew over dry fields, analyzed soil, sent data to farmers' phones. Entire crops were saved. In parts of Africa and Asia, food security rose because of silent Samsung tech. Cities became smart too. Samsung built traffic systems that adjusted to real-time data. Air sensors in buildings. Disaster alerts powered by AI prediction. Urban life got smoother, safer, more responsive. Less chaos. More clarity. Through partnerships with humanitarian organizations, Samsung brought clean tech to refugee camps. Solar-powered clinics. Mobile classrooms. Offline learning devices. Where governments failed, quiet tech lit up hope in dusty corners. And through it all, Samsung kept listening. Each new product asked, will this reduce stress? Save time? Save energy? Protect dignity? Not every feature passed the test. But that was the point. No more tech for tech's sake. By now, Samsung had redefined success. It wasn't about market share. It was about meaning. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was a kind of quiet, steady force in homes, hospitals, schools, hearts. By the late 2020s, Samsung had stopped chasing trends. It started setting them. While other brands followed hype, Samsung followed purpose. Its products weren't flashy first. They were thoughtful first. Beauty came from usefulness. In education, Samsung's AI tutors reached millions. A child in a small village learned physics from the same AI that trained students in Tokyo or Berlin. Knowledge became a right, not a privilege. Samsung turned screens into equalizers. Homes became healing spaces. Samsung developed tech that monitored air quality, emotional patterns, even daily routines. If something changed, like increased stress or poor sleep, the system responded. Not with panic, with care. In global health, Samsung created portable labs, small devices that could analyze water, blood, or viruses in minutes. In rural areas and disaster zones, this saved lives. The tools were tiny, but the impact was massive. Samsung's factories evolved too. Automation made them cleaner, safer, more sustainable. Workers weren't replaced, they were upgraded. Trained to manage machines, not just follow them. AI and humans worked side by side, not against each other. And in space, Samsung's satellites became more than tools. They became networks of light, providing internet to areas with no roads, supporting research on climate change, migration, biodiversity. Quiet eyes above the Earth, watching gently. Through virtual reality, Samsung helped people visit lost cities, dive into oceans, walk through history. Its VR wasn't just for games, it was for empathy, for connection, for reminding us of who we are and what we could lose. Ethics became part of every launch. Every algorithm was tested for fairness. Every data system was built with consent. Samsung proved that tech didn't have to exploit. It could respect. It could restore. It could stand with people, not over them. The company's leaders no longer talked about domination. They talked about responsibility. Not just being the best, but being the most trusted. Not growing fast, but growing right. It was slow power. And it was working. By now, Samsung wasn't chasing the future. It was building it. Brick by brick. Bit by bit. Not for fame, not for clicks, but for something bigger. A world that finally worked better for everyone. By now, Samsung wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Its presence was felt, not announced. In your home, your heart, your hopes. The company had become part of daily life, not through noise, but through quiet, careful, human-centered design. People didn't talk about Samsung the way they talked about trending apps. They trusted it like a power line or running water. When your Samsung device worked, you didn't cheer. You exhaled. It was there, reliable, unseen, unshakable. Its logo meant more than a product. It meant dignity, access, stability. A child with a Samsung tablet had a classroom. A farmer with a Samsung drone had a harvest. A refugee with a Samsung charger had a voice. This was power with a purpose. In a world that kept rushing, Samsung slowed down. It invested in long-term change, not viral fame. While others made smart devices, Samsung made devices that made people smarter, calmer, healthier. That changed everything. Samsung's role in culture also evolved. It didn't sponsor just to advertise, it sponsored to uplift. Music festivals where deaf children could feel vibrations. Sports arenas with tech for blind fans. Inclusion was no longer a bonus, it was the standard. At a global level, governments sought Samsung's help, not just for infrastructure, but for wisdom. The company's engineers sat beside educators, health leaders, urban planners. Samsung wasn't selling. It was listening, co-creating futures. Even in crisis, floods, fires, war, Samsung moved fast. It sent solar stations, mobile clinics, data centers. It didn't wait for press. It didn't brand everything. It helped because it could, because that's what quiet giants do. And inside the company, the culture was shifting. Leaders weren't chosen just by numbers, but by empathy. Employees weren't trained just to win, but to understand. The goal wasn't disruption. It was healing, repairing what tech had once broken. By 2030, Samsung didn't call itself a tech company anymore. It called itself a life company. Its job wasn't to create the next app or widget. Its job was to reduce suffering, extend joy, build systems that cared as much as they calculated. And the most powerful part? It didn't ask for credit. It just kept showing up. Quiet, steady, global, human. Samsung had become something rare, a corporation that felt like a promise kept. Every great journey ends where it began, with people. Samsung started with dried fish and noodles. Now it builds satellites and neural AI. But the heart has never changed. From day one, it was about making life better. One tool, one touch, one future at a time. Samsung didn't become a giant overnight. It grew quietly, through mistakes, through risk, through war and hunger. Its strength came not from money, but from meaning, from asking again and again, how can we help? And then doing it. Many companies rise. Few last. Fewer still matter. Samsung matters because it never stopped listening. To customers, to critics, to the world. It didn't chase perfection. It chased usefulness. And in that, it found something deeper than success. Today, millions carry Samsung in their pocket. Not just for features, but for trust. Because behind every phone is a history of sweat, steel, sacrifice, and silent faith in what humanity could become if given the right tools. Samsung's story isn't perfect. It had flaws, failures, moments of doubt. But it learned, grew, changed. That's what made it real. That's what made it strong. Not the stars in its logo, but the fire in its purpose. And now, the story returns to you. Because you, too, are building something. A dream, a goal, a future. You don't need to change the world overnight. You just need to start. Small, quiet, like a noodle shop in 1938. Let Samsung's story remind you. No dream is too strange. No idea too early. No background too humble. Greatness isn't loud. It's patient. It shows up every day, grows in silence. And when the time comes, it speaks with impact. So whatever your mission is, go for it. Build it. Share it. And when it gets hard, because it will, remember this. The same company that now launches satellites once sold candy and shirts. You never know what's possible until you begin. Thank you for taking this journey. If it moved you, if it made you think, leave a comment. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. Your voice matters, and your journey is just beginning. And hey, who knows? Maybe you're building the next Samsung.